Hello to all of you who are here so far, and welcome. I think we'll give it a few more minutes to let people get connected and set up. I think it's a little bit harder for people to make sure that they're ready for things at this point. Just to let you know, we are recording this session so that we can put it on the library website. But you're certainly welcome to keep your video turned off if you prefer. Trying not to record everyone's living rooms and cats and family members. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And if a couple of more people come in and join us, fine, they can catch up with where we are. So good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Turner. I'm a librarian for Drexel University Libraries, usually based at Haggerty Library, but welcome to my dining room, which is where I'm working now. And this webinar is part of a series that we're doing through our Scholarly Connections department. That we're doing just short previews, teasers of different resources that we have available through the libraries, or different ways of using some of the resources that we might have. So I welcome you to take a look at the full list of webinars that we're offering. We do plan to put recordings of all of the webinars on the library website for those who can't attend them in person. And then watch, because we'll have some more topics coming up in the winter, whether we're online or back on site in person. So this afternoon, we're going to be talking about Pivot. And Pivot is a database that is primarily about funding opportunities, but two additional pieces of it that people are not quite as familiar with are that it contains researcher profiles. So you will build and establish your own brief profile in the Pivot system, which helps to link you up to funding opportunities and can also be used to help link up to researchers who might have similar interests. And then the third piece of Pivot is the conferences or invited papers database. So if you're looking for a place to either go to physically or a virtual conference to present your work, that's something that you can do through the Pivot database. So I'm going to start sharing my screen to you, and we will talk about where to find Pivot and then get a look at it. So give me a second to get my screen up here. All right, there we go. The two easy ways to get to Pivot are from the library's databases A to Z list, obviously under P for Pivot, or if you go to our list of funding of library guides and look under the funding and research section, we have a guide page that has a lot of information about different resources that you can use to look for funding information. Now, Pivot right here up at the top. Some of you who have been around for a little while might remember the Community of Science Funding Opportunities database. That's actually what Pivot is built from. Yes, it's built from the old Community of Science platform. So many of you who might have had a profile in Community of Science will see that it's been ported over to the Pivot system. Pivot is actually made available to us by Ex Libris, which the Drexel libraries have been working with in participating in their early adopter program for the Esploro research database. That's going to be a new way of presenting Drexel's research assets, Drexel's research products to the scholarly universe. And you'll be hearing more about that through the libraries in the future. But Pivot is one piece that connects into that, and that's the reason that we have it available to us now. So I'm going to jump into Pivot, and we're going to take a look at what you can do. The first thing that you want to do when you're starting out in Pivot is create a personal account. Now there'll be a sign in or login link up at the upper right hand corner. You just want to go in and set that up using your Drexel email address. And then Pivot will actually prompt you to see whether there is an existing profile for you. If you're a faculty member, or even for some university staff, there's a good chance that there's already a profile there. Now, those pre-existing profiles, and there are about 3 million faculty profiles in the system, might have been created from previous systems, such as Community of Science, or might have been created by screen scraping from academic websites. So when you're looking at the list of existing profiles, if you find one that is for you, you just claim it as your own profile. Or there are steps that you can take to create a new profile. Don't be concerned, this is not a system where you need to input all of your existing publications or anything of that sort. You can sort of populate information about yourself as you use it. Just some basic information about your university affiliations and your research interests is usually enough. So I'm going to open up quickly the profile that was already here for me the first time I used Pivot. And when I look at this, I know that all of this information was pulled directly from the library website. So this is not work that I had to do at all. It is possible to opt out if you absolutely do not want to have a profile, if you don't want any information about yourself to be visible in Pivot, but that does limit some of the features that you can take advantage of. You'll still be able to search for funding and view funding opportunities, but some of the customization, you won't be able to save searches or track opportunities or get recommendations. So any questions from anyone about profiles? How to set them up or get started?
I have a question.
Sure.
When I was just looking, sort of following along on the website as you were going, there's an option when you create your profile to use your university, a sort of university login, or create one using your email address. And when I clicked on the university institutional credentials, Drexel didn't appear in the list. So I'm assuming we use our email address.
Use your email address.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
There are some universities that use different login methods.
Okay, thank you.
Now, one thing about the profiles is you can designate someone as a proxy for your profile. That person has to have a profile themselves in the Pivot system, but then they can basically help you keep your profile updated, help keep track of funding opportunities. So if you've got a good grad student or an assistant who works with you, you might want to do that.
I have a question.
Sure.
When it prompts you to claim profiles, you're seeing multiple profiles, do you just click all of them? if they're all you.
I am not sure. I don't think I have encountered the question of multiple profiles, but I can certainly check on that and get back to you. It's Chloe, right?
Yeah. I guess
Okay.
some of them are from previous affiliations, actually. So I would assume those would be, that they would not be good ones to claim, actually, now that I look at it. Okay, thanks.
Well, let me take a look, because there may be a way to merge them.
Oh, that would be cool.
You certainly might want information about your previous work to be there.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So let's move on and take a look at the different ways to find funding information. There's essentially 3 different ways that you can look for funding. One is to browse by keywords, which is really more a matter of browsing broad categories. And then there's a quick search, basically just the search box that appears up at the top of the screen here, and an advanced search. The browse by keywords options is kind of fun. That's what this big colorful wheel is. But honestly, it can be a little bit challenging to pinpoint exactly what you're looking for. So essentially, as you move your mouse over this wheel, it gives you broad disciplines. And then as you move out further on the wheel, those narrow down further and further. And as you can see, it's showing you in the middle of the wheel the amount of funding opportunities that are available. And of course, you can tell just by the proportions of the colors that, you know, there's a lot of funding out there for health and medicine. There's a lot of funding for the natural sciences. But then as you get into social sciences and so on, the quadrants get a little bit smaller. Frankly, I'm a little bit surprised that engineering is smaller than social sciences. But coming back here to the health and medicine, I can move out to the outer ring and start looking for narrower areas. And when I find the one that's of interest to me, so I'm looking here at environmental health, I can open that up and it lists for me all of the opportunities that would be available in that category. Now the search results from here or from the simple text word search are going to look essentially the same. I can choose the way that I want to sort this. They're giving it to me by relevance, but I can sort by title, sponsor name, highest or lowest amount, or the soonest or furthest deadlines coming up. So let's see what are the highest possible funding opportunities. Then I've got a whole list of filter options over here on the left-hand side. I can look at things that are limited submission, which essentially means that submissions from a single institution need to be coordinated. I can look at funding types. So I'm looking for research funding, so we'll put that filter on. And then let's say that I'm looking for funding opportunities for early career applicants. And then there's some keywords that I can use to filter. The type of currency, it doesn't have a filter in this section for country, but you could certainly use US dollar currency as a surrogate. Make a pretty good guess that if you're using that as a filter, that it's going to be funding available in the United States. And then as I look at each one of the options here, it gives me some very, very brief information. And then I can open any of those up. Let's see. Let's take a look at the Architecture for Health Foundation. And here's all of the specific information about this funding opportunity. There's a link back to the originating website, information about the funding amounts, the applicants who are eligible, residency requirements, a link to an abstract, and any other eligibility requirements that might be connected to it. And of course, the upcoming deadlines. And this one isn't actually anticipated until next August, so it would certainly give me plenty of time to work on it, which means that I might want to come up here and set this as an opportunity that I'm tracking. And that would help me keep up with any updates about it. I could also put this tracked opportunity on a calendar for myself so that I'm reminded 6 months from now or 8 months from now to go back and make sure that I'm working on this and getting it ready. So going back to the searching options, again, One of the second ways of finding funding is just the simple search box here. And that's easiest to use just to put in a couple of keywords about what you're looking for. So I could look for funding here for health literacy. And again, it gives me the same type of result list that once again, I can sort in whatever way is most useful to me and filter using the options on the left. Now, one thing to be aware of with that simple search, most of the time when I'm teaching students to do literature searching, the one thing that I'm telling them is be specific about what you're looking for. And this is a situation where often being too specific is not going to work. So if I was looking for funding for work that I'm doing with Diamondback terrapins, I actually did this with a grad student a few years ago. It doesn't find anything because that's much too specific. I might want to try instead terrapins or turtles. And now I've got some possibilities. Or I might even want to be broader and look at marine biology or environmental biology and see if there's something where research on terrapins would fit into the specifications, but might not be mentioned explicitly in the grant information. Now, the advanced search gives you a lot more space to put together possible terminology for a search. It lets you specify fields that you're looking in. So you can search in the titles or abstracts of funding opportunities. You can search for specific sponsors. If you happen to have a CFDA number, you can put that in. And you can, as you can see, you can build a pretty complex search here. But what's really most useful about the advanced search is that you then have a whole list of filtering opportunities down at the bottom. And the filter facets work in two ways. The first list are things that you want to include. So I may, for example, want to list things that require United States citizenship. But then those filtering options, when you scroll down a little bit further, also let you add exclusion criteria. So for example, if I'm looking for research opportunities that are not specifically for US citizens, I can put that in as something to be excluded. Or I can exclude specific types of funding. So let's say that I want to make sure that I'm not looking at meeting or conference awards. I don't want to see those, I'm not interested in them. I can put that in as an exclusion criteria for my search. And of course you can clear those as you go. Perhaps I I want to see funding opportunities that are not specifically for academic institutions. So I can put in any of the criteria that I want to include or exclude, and then again go back and put in my search interests. So now when we're looking at these, we know that none of these opportunities are specifically for academic institutions. Now again, when you find an opportunity that's of interest to you, so we'll look at the American Fisheries Society, you can share that opportunity to other colleagues who might be interested, and you can track it. It's also going to show you, and this is based entirely on the profiles in the system, if there are other collaborators within your institution who might also be interested in this funding opportunity. So we can open this up and see any potential collaborators. And honestly, I'm seeing right here that there are a couple of these that need to be updated, because one of them is a colleague who has retired and another is for someone who has left Drexel. So be careful with the results of this. Any questions about the different ways of searching or working with the results of your funding searches? The other option that you have, particularly if you have put together a more complex search, is that you can save that search strategy. Give it a name, and you can opt whether you want to get a weekly email message telling you whether there's any new or updated opportunities related to that search. And now if I go back to my profile, if I go back to my profile, I can find my saved funding opportunities from here, my saved searches, and I can edit those, change them, or delete them as I wish to. It will also show me announcements, and when any time that I log in to, there's our saved searches there. I'm sorry, I forgot that it was back on the home page. So from here, I can see any of the search strategies that I've saved, and every time I log into Pivot, it will tell me whether any of these have been updated, whether there are any new opportunities that match them. Now, the third part of Pivot, as I mentioned, are conferences. Really conferences and invited papers. And again, the searching options are essentially the same, but as you can see, there's also what I think is a simpler, more straightforward subject browse. So if I wanted to look for funding opportunities related to library science, I'm not funding opportunities, but conference opportunities or invited papers, I could look at this and I could see that if I wanted to submit an abstract for the Medical Library Association meeting, which will be next May, I'd better get myself working on it because the deadline's coming up in about 2 weeks. So again, there's some filtering options, primarily related to when the deadline is coming up. There's also country filters. So if I wanted to look only for funding opportunities or conference opportunities in France, I could do that. Probably not a lot of prospects of traveling to France anytime in the near future. So the system on the whole is very straightforward. I've just gone to the overall profile discovery option where I could browse through different departments, different entities within Drexel University to see what researchers are included. But that's essentially what Pivot is and what it does. So I'll ask if there's any questions at this point. All right. Again, I encourage you to take a look at it, see what might be useful here to you. On our funding page, again, this is in our library guides. There are some additional funding information sources that you can look at. Grants.gov, the catalog of federal domestic assistance, and so on. But I would certainly recommend checking out Pivot, setting up a profile for yourself, and see what kind of funding opportunities it can find for you.
Kathleen, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Yes, so in addition to be a faculty member, I'm also the Westfall College's Associate Dean for Research. And
yes.
I was wondering if you do these types, or someone at the library does these types of sessions for, say, groups of faculty that are focused on a specific area. You know, I think it would be really great to do something like this with folks who all have a certain common area of interest. Is that possible?
I have with faculty groups in the areas that I support. As I'm sure you're aware, right now we do not have somebody working specifically with Westfall.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
But I would certainly be happy to talk with you about doing something.
That would be great. And obviously, have you ever done it for sessions for grad students?
I have. Actually, back when it was Community of Science, we did some sessions for grad students and particularly doctoral students who were looking for fellowship information.
Great.
But I'd be very happy to talk to you and put something together.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Chloe, I'm going to check into that question about what happens if there's multiple profiles for you. So I think that's an interesting issue. And if there aren't any further questions, I thank you all for joining me this afternoon and hope to see you at some of the other webinars that we're presenting over the next few weeks.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, and everyone.
Thank you, Kathleen.
This was